So, one of the most interesting things about being alive now and going to work is that every day, increasingly, we're working on creating more inclusive workspaces. I'd like to share with you an article that I have come across recently in The Economist, in the recent edition of The Economist, and this is from April 20th. Now, I subscribe to The Economist not because I believe in their worldview, but because I think they're informative and they have good writing. But I also find that they kind of have to be forced to reckon with the social aspects of what they talk about. In this article, it's a man's world. They have recently started a new segment called Bartleby, where they talk about management and management practices. In this instance, they really look into implicit biases at work, and I'd like to just begin with reading for you a little bit of the beginning. Pregnant women have limited mobility. That is obvious to anyone who is that is obvious to anyone who has had a baby, but didn't occur to the founders of Google when they designed their car park. And I'm sure many of them were parents. When Sheryl Sandberg, then head of online sales, became pregnant in 2004, she made a simple request: parking spaces for expectant women as close to the building entrance as possible. Now, this is just one, as the article points out, of many ways that our workplace was designed with a singular kind of worldview. Men, and particularly a certain kind of man. I don't want to really get into what I think that means. I'll just share with you what the article says because I know we live in such a difficultly polarized world between liberals and illiberals. And this is definitely not a liberal magazine. So I hope that those of you who look at a black gay man talking about something social, who've already labeled me as liberal, hear what I'm saying here. They go on to say that this is just one example of how many aspects of the workplace lack the female perspective. In her brilliant book, Invisible Women Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men, Carolyn Criado Perez shows how widespread these subtle biases can be. Now, again, this article points out a lot of implicit biases in the workplace. Towards the end, for example, they point out from another researcher who's written a book, Biases, the New Science of Race and Inequality, and they show how in America, Black sounding names get fewer callbacks than those with traditional European names. We know it's even worse in France. If your name sounds Black or Arab or Muslim, you're definitely going to have your resume put in the garbage can before it's even considered. And yet, those who actually get the job may come to believe that they've earned their position through pure merit. And anyone who says differently is just complaining and they're just a liberal who's lazy and wants to live off of someone else's work. They go on to say that white people with a criminal record received as many callbacks from employers as Black people who had never committed an offense. Think about this. So, someone like me, who's never committed an offense, I've had exactly one speeding ticket in my life. A white man with an actual criminal record is more likely to get a callback for a job than me. Oh, even if that white man has less education than I do. Those are facts statistically. And what we have to acknowledge is, are we talking about individuals who are racist or sexist? Because that's the hard part that no one wants to admit to that, but it's true. And we all grew up in societies where we learn these sorts of norms. The third paragraph here is where what really spawned me to make such a video. And it says it starts at the recruitment stage. Women are put off from applying for jobs that use words in their adverts such as aggressive or ambitious. When one company changed its ad to focus on qualities such as enthusiasm and innovation and used a photo of a woman rather than a man, the proportion of female applicants rose from 5 to 40%. You got to say that there is something there. It's not just about individual choices, but we have, in very many ways, as sociologists, and I think Bell Hooks is really good at explaining this, we've formulated our world around the patriarchal gaze. I don't want to get too deep into using sociological terms to explain this, but it effectively means that we all male, female, learn to see the world through patriarchy. We often talk about how women judge each other competitively for the attention of men. Chimamanda Adichie, in her TED Talk, "We Should All Be Feminists," explains this exquisitely. The patriarchal male gaze. We also add race to this, and we see the amount of money Black women put into straightening, lightening, and bleaching their hair. The amount of money that women have to put into what's called a makeup tax over a lifetime just to appear quote unquote presentable and acceptable in the workplace. These are things that are increasingly unacceptable because our world is much more interconnected. We're much more able to have nuanced conversations about this and not just what the dominant mainstream media tells us we should be talking about. So, again, some people watching this could be illiberal and completely dismissing me, while others who are watching this, they may have had an inclination that there was something going on, but there is increasingly research around this. Why? Because researchers themselves are broadening their perspectives, broadening their scopes. Now, one thing that I'd like for you to take away from this is that what can we do? What can we do as individuals to create change? We can't all suddenly unlearn the sexism or racism or classism or religious chauvinism that we may have grown up with, or may have learned and had reinforced all throughout our lives. But what we can do is ask ourselves, are we empathetic in our own individual spaces? Are we just constructing a worldview that's based on that I'm the norm and people who are different from me are measured against me? That's human nature. That's even animalistic nature. But what we can do is use our intellect to say, wait a minute, I'm not the center of this. We can be mindful. And that's ultimately what many of these articles, and you will see many of them pointing to this. I get a subscription to The Economist, but I Googled it so that I could share it digitally. And I was shocked to find that they have many articles over the past 15 years called It's a Man's World, and really questioning the idea that what it means to be a worker is measured and constructed by what it means to be a man, and that everything else must adhere, assimilate to that. We're in a very different world now. Leaders need different skills. As a matter of fact, we often need those skills that traditionally we taught to girls: dialogue, sense making of other people's feelings, as opposed to the competitiveness and combativeness that we are often taught to value as boys. So I look forward to your comments and best of luck.